Hello, my name is John Farrar. Today we're going to be taking a look at Co-op. Co-op is a new framework that So Sensible is putting out as free open source software for the whole ColdFusion community. Okay, here's our first form we're going to take a look at, but as you see the columns don't line up, but we'll take a look at how to fix that in a moment. Now you see what we've done is when you look at how we're using our custom tags we built, we're using the CFM port for tag libraries. So this SOS skin you see here, well this skin that you see wrapped around our site, that's all generated as a part of the skin, and all our SOS tags are in the following SOS directory. Then we have co-op tags that are in the following directory also. What this does is it allows us to use this technology whether we're on an enterprise server or a shared hosting server, making this available to everyone and also making the code a little bit plainer and easier to follow. So you see we have our co-op form here and we have an ID of sign in form. Then we have username, and here's our username, which is what the form passes back. Regular text input box is what this will generate. And then we have password, a reference, and a line return, then our co-op submit button. So far, not much different than a regular HTML form. Let's look at how we can make this stuff line up and do stuff better. Of course, if we're going to have stuff line up, what we're actually going to do with our HTML is we're going to build some rows. So let's put in our rows tag, and for each row, of course, we're going to put in our row tag. Nothing fancy to that. Makes sense. And as you can see, we have multiple rows here. So as far as our form goes, we're actually going to have two sets of rows. Okay, now we're going to take and put our text up there. I'll just put this all in one line. And we'll copy our text up here. And for our next row, we'll go ahead and just copy our box up here. And as you can see, we went ahead and completed the second row. Refresh, and now our columns are aligned and in working order simply by adding them to rows. But what you will notice is that our labels aren't quite lined up right. Well, let me paste this in here. We're going to go ahead and tell both of these to align right. Refresh, and there you see we have align right. So real simple, makes your markup easier. Okay, now you see we have a little more detailed form. We have a drop box with data, and everything's already lined up. I'm going to show you real quick what happens when we take a certain feature out that we added in so you can see the value of it. This feature here is column span. So we take this column span out here because it was spanning across these two columns where we have the state and the zip code, and you see it sort of pushes things out. What I want you to see here is the fact that the difference between this form, although we'll have some extra stuff on the end, and the one that's after it is basically the same. See here, you didn't see much page jump at all, but if you will watch here, you'll see where we have data going into this state field. Now we have no data going into the state field, and other than that there's not really a lot of difference between these two forms, but we're going to go back around, look at the form, and we'll look at that. Well, we'll hit the extra stuff down below in a moment, but this top form's the same basic thing, but we had data go into these things. And if we look back at our information here, there's no data being passed in on the markup page. We passed the data in. If you look, it's demo2 underscore 2.cfm. Well, in the same directory, you have demo2 underscore 2 dot cfc. And this is the coprocessor, and we call that because that's literally what it does. And there's certain events that are triggered by this CFC, and those events that get triggered are on first call and on page start. We'll take a look at on page start because that gets called every time you hit the page, and that gets called first. Now what you see here is we have the state data is coming from this getState simple array function. And as you can see, this is what it loads in. We have Arizona, Alabama, Idaho, Indiana, and Massachusetts. And there they are. Now if we wanted to pass in something just a little bit more complex, then we'd just taken, and we have to pass two more fields. And if we look down, what we see is a value, which would go into the value portion of the option box of HTML, and display, but your markup person doesn't actually have to know that. They know value and display are pretty simple. So they say, okay, here's my value and here's my display. So we go init. Remember the ID of our form? Let's take a look at that again. ID is sign up. So the initial value for sign up form, and the initial value for ID state is the name of the element. State, data, and we pass in this array. It could also be a query. We'll show you how to do that later. And the other thing we want you to see, we're passing in the state here, the value field equals value, and display field equals display. And as you can see, we now have a different data set, and it's passed in automatically. Say if you wanted to select Illinois, well, we come down here, we find out that our Illinois value is 03. Okay, so what we'd do is we'd pass the same thing in again. We're going to pass in 03. And there you go. And as you see, that was the order passed in. It defaulted as we selected. But the truth is, the only time you're really going to want to do that isn't on every page. It's actually on the first call to your form. So what we're going to do is go ahead and add that where it should be, down here in city, and here's where the rest of that data is coming. Our sign up form, the first name element, value is Jerry, last name value is Smith, and so on. Email, here's where we set selected, and here's where we, as before, we actually can select multiple items. This is for our checkbox item, and what you see here is there are two items selected, which was the SOS updates, the SOS blog, and we look forward to showing you more. We've got some Ajax things coming in future versions, some validation libraries. Co-op is completely open source, and you can find information about this very soon on the ReaForge sites where we're looking to post this. We look forward to getting your ideas for more features and more form elements to add, and have fun with it.